Hey everybody, welcome back to my Star Wars show. I'm your host Abram, joined as always by Mr. Andrew Roscoe, and we're here today for a very, very special episode because we are talking about the newest Star Wars show on Disney Plus that is Skeleton Crew. Um, I'm really excited to sit down and talk with you, Andrew, about this one because I was excited for it. We talked about it in the past in a
Mhm.
cursory way together, offline and on the show, but I didn't jump at it when those first episodes came out. But when we made the plan to sit down and watch through and discuss it, uh, I ended up being very glad we did because I have to say, Andrew, I totally loved Skeleton Crew, and I'm excited to get
Mhm.
into why. I'm excited to get into why you loved it as well. But we got to frame it in an interesting way here because, unfortunately, this show's not being watched by too many people. So we got to sit here and we have to be the defenders, the frontline defenders for Skeleton Crew, because I truly, truly think it is one of the most interesting and lovely and fun things we've gotten into Star Wars in a very, very long time. But Andrew, I'm curious, as we're starting out here, if you could in like 3 sentences give the elevator pitch 40,000 feet in the air, it's a really high elevator, for why people ought to watch Skeleton Crew, what would you say?
I would say joy and fun are the highest motivators to watch this show.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so not. We talked about this before. It's so nice that when we get something that's kind of so far removed from the core Skywalker, uh, New Republic
Yeah.
drama, to get away from that for a while, but still be anchored in the Star Wars universe and kind of just like, I mean, if it wasn't for the show notes about what we knew going into the show, there's nothing within the show, at least in like the first two episodes, that indicates when the show
Yeah.
takes place, really, until you start hearing some, name drops of certain events and certain certain things that have unfolded in the greater broader galaxy. But like, it's just the core cast of kids, of characters. Like we talked about before, how hard it is to like get kids that can act well
Yeah.
on a show, especially in Star
Yes.
Wars. But like they nailed it here. I feel like all these kid actors, they feel so like believable. They
Yeah.
don't like half-ass it or whatever. Like it feels it's like watching like ET, or I've never seen the Goon. I've seen part of the first Goonies movie, but it's kind of like harkens back to like that ET kind of era.
Yeah.
Stand By Me, if you've ever seen that. It very much feels like those kind of era of films that we don't really get anymore, at least not in movies, really, because they're just not big draw blockbusters. But like, it feels nice to kind of get a little cozier. And I know
Yeah.
I know you don't like that word so much, but I feel like this. We're referring to video games, but here in the Star Wars sense, this feels like a very cozy Star Wars show. Like the stakes don't feel like, geez, how do we top a Star Destroyer, like, or a Death Star? Let's do another Death Star. How do we top that? Oh, let's do Starkiller Base. How do we do that? Oh, let's top it with Star Destroyers. They all have Planet Destroyer. No, like that's not. It's a much more contained, much more just like a feel good kind of Star Wars
Yeah.
story. That's like something that someone could like just bring up. It's like, oh, this one time, like it feels like a legend within Star Wars, sort of like a. I mean, the whole pitch is of it being kind of like piratey and stuff like that. And there's definitely a lot of that, but it just feels like a very, I don't know what to say, I guess wholesome in a way. And not that Star Wars
Yeah.
is ever like X-rated, you know what I mean? But like with even in contrast to like Andor or Ahsoka or things like that, where like the stakes feel so much more grim and much darker, or even compared to like the original trilogy or any of the trilogies, this feels so much more contained and so much more kind of like even more of a side story than like Solo or Rogue One, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm in complete agreement with you. To me, this is like the ideal for what these shows would be. This is a small, particular look into the Star Wars universe that has its own flavor, that
Mhm.
has its own storytelling objectives, that exists largely by itself, and I think serves as a reminder that Star Wars doesn't just have to be one thing.
Yeah.
And I really like that because when you watch this show, it triggers a lot of nostalgias, I think, but not in the way that look like the Book of Boba Fett might try to, by literally bring back a character. It's a nostalgia for a sort of 80s style of filmmaking and storytelling. And at the same time, as you're saying, it really is very heavily pirate influenced. the the blasters that look like flintlocks and the cutlass and the way that the droid 33 talks and the premise of this planet of lost treasure, it really signals to me, and someone was comparing it to the Mandalorian on Twitter, and its sort of western genre trappings. It
Mhm.
signals to me that, as we're actually saying in our what would we do with the future of Star Wars video, there is space to take the hallmarks of this universe and apply a new lens to them, and to sort of see and find something that I think that many people didn't think Star Wars could provide anymore, which is a genuinely refreshing and, as you're saying, nostalgic and warm story. I mean, I think it's a testament to the number of highly skilled directors that were brought on board for this project, that this really was a labor of love
Mhm.
that had, similar to an Andor, similar to a Mandalorian season 1, no real larger objective other than to be sort of successful internally, cohesive, fun, and, as you're saying, very joyful. So I really want to dive into why that's so true, and why, for me, this is right below Andor in terms of the shows we've gotten from Star Wars. But I did want to note that we did get one submission from our community here when we solicited some takes on Skeleton Crew. The one take was from our good friend Steven, who said, "I thought I was going to watch it and then didn't." And I thought that this is actually a really nice place to frame the conversation, actually, because, as I was doing a little reading earlier, unfortunately, this show fell out of the Nielsen TV ratings, I think, just after episode 2. And the sort of data we have, obviously, TV data reporting is very behind. You get
Mhm.
information like a month later about, but all told, it's seeming like it's the lowest performing Star Wars show,
Lower
which
than
is,
Acolyte, yeah.
yeah, which is a real shame, I think. And it makes me wonder, what about this doesn't appeal to your average viewer. I mean, I think you can point to a general Star Wars fatigue, no doubt. And I think that that's probably one of the largest factors you can attribute. Like, if this came out right after Mandalorian season 1, like if they had this show back in that 2019 2020
Mm.
era, I think it would have been really beloved, really beloved. But unfortunately, it came out here 6 years later in 2025, when I think enthusiasm's at a low. But I want to actually use that point to segue into this overarching idea we have about this show being refreshing in some ways, and I think really the perfect spot to jump back in if you've been a little bit jaded or disinterested in
Mhm.
Star Wars stories as of late, because I really love the framing of the narrative here. I think that's one of the greatest pieces of praise I can offer. This notion of our small cast of kid characters who are fresh faced and have this childlike dynamic being thrust into this larger pirate narrative with this really, you know, hardened old man in Jod, who very quickly demonstrates aptitude for the Force, and very quickly sort of sets up this interesting, intriguing dynamic between our characters, where, it's fairly obvious, I think, how the relationship is going to fall apart, but is really endearing to watch unfold. And so, for people, for the sake of the viewer here, we are going to talk about spoilers. So I think our praise in the main should be enough to get you to watch the show. But if not, listen on. And I think even if we talk about some of the more specific plot points, it'll hopefully only intrigue you further. But Andrew, what's your thought here on this dynamic between our characters, between our kids internally in their little group of four, and then with Jod as well?
Well, just getting to, there's one thing I really like about the characters, and
Yeah,
it makes sense for the setting and everything. Is that the early like naivete they kind of have when once they're exposed to the greater galaxy. I love there's like the part where Wim and Eel they're getting like they're getting food at this little food stand, and Wim takes
yeah,
out like these big old gold credits, old I guess they're old Republic credits, and he's like, is this enough?" And like the guy, the the stall guy, like quickly realizes that this kid doesn't know what he's doing. He's like, actually, you know what? He's like, maybe you should get a few more. Like
Yeah.
he's kind of taking it. Like they don't realize like where they come from. Like for them, it's just like, oh, like this is lunch money, right? This is
Yeah.
lunch money, and like we quickly get the sense to the greater galaxy that this is like maybe who knows enough for like a ship or something like that. They kind of just the naivete that these characters have, and I like the dynamic. I like the dynamics they have, especially where they end up, because I feel like
Yeah.
some of the kid characters do kind of grow up by the end. In a certain sense, they do kind of grow up by the end of the show. But the dynamic of how we have Fern, who's our headstrong kind of, she quickly becomes like the captain of the group early
Yeah.
on. Neil, who just visually I absolutely adore him, just with the big old fat cheeks and the little snout. And I kind of like he's obviously kind of like the if I could liken him to sort of like a Wizard of Oz character, he's kind of like the Cowardly Lion, sort of in a way, kind of.
Yeah.
And he's just kind of like I think as a KB or someone tells him something about like eating from, he's like this is my nose, you know that, right? Like it's like I don't eat with my snout, like it's my nose. So he's a cute little character. He has like this little crush on his little co-student over there, the little green alien. Also, just the variety of aliens is just so awesome.
Yes.
I thought you were gonna
Absolutely.
say something more, Amber.
Oh, well, I was just trying to emphasize that point because that's one of the first things I noticed about the show. Obviously, we get Neil, and he's pretty well realized. I think that the sort of practical effects and the melding of CG isn't always totally successful, but I almost don't even really care when you're seeing so many aliens. It's a common refrain on this show that we always want more aliens,
Yeah.
and we get more here pound for pound than maybe all the other Disney Plus shows combined. I loved that about this.
Yeah, KB, who's like, I guess she's like an android. She's
Yeah,
partially machine. I was like, is she all machine? Because there's like a part where we see like the back of her skull like goes pretty deep. So, but then she has parents, she has moms. So
yeah,
clearly she's not fully, fully a droid or whatever. So, and then that dynamic she has with Fern about kind of be like a tag along character, but she also is like she can't keep up with her physically, also like in a sense. And like kind of like it's not just these kids, like they do have like personalities, each one's different. Wim, who I like his whole thing where to him, like Jedi are kind of like what medieval knights are kind of like to us.
yeah,
Like they represent adventure and bravery and chivalry and all this stuff. And like when he finally meets Jod, and he's kind of like, maybe like this guy's not living up to like what I had in mind. And then we'll get more into that of how that turns out and stuff. Like I do like how they have like how Wim's like, I want to go on an adventure, right? It's that typical main hero character
yeah,
trope, but it's kind of refreshing because it comes from a point of like a little kid, and it's not like he has higher ideals of like I want to fight for the rebellion or something like that. He's like, I just generally just want to go see what's out there. And where we get to by the end of the show with Fern talking about how like, yeah, like even in the worst parts of the galaxy, like we saw like a lot of danger, but like there was good people too. Like it's just
yeah.
it's just it feels very very different, very atypical, like very different from traditional Star Wars. And I just like the core characters, the parents, the doting parents who worry about, they go off on their own little side quest, to try to find out what's going on with their kids. Like it's just really likable characters all around.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think what the show does really well on a writing level, and to your earlier point that the kids do on a performance level, is that they are able to exist in this really compelling space where they feel like they're capable of having adult conversations or sort of more emotional responses that sort of
Mhm.
a big narrative like this need, but at the same time they are kids and it never really feels like you're listening to the voice of an adult writing through the performance of a child. I think we were levying that complaint against the portrayal of Leia in Kenobi, if I remember correctly. But
Oh, okay, yeah, that sounds right.
here I think you get the kids trying to kind of, as they're fumbling around, learn more about each other and build relationships and solve problems, but also they argue and they try to take command of the ship through calling dibs and they sometimes just get into no, yeah, no, you, yeah, so arguments. And so it strikes this really great tone where the kids are believable, but
Yeah,
they more than provide enough sort of deep material to let the story have, I think, a real heart and a real message about this sort of yearning for something greater and for finding your own place in the world, and having an optimism, and not being afraid to try,
Yeah.
and to fail and get better, and be scared and overcome that fear. I think that a lot like the core Star Wars trilogy, the original trilogy, Skeleton Crew operates with these very simple themes, and they're effective themes, they're universal themes,
Mhm.
and I really like that a lot. It's good versus bad to an extent, and, it's about figuring out who the real good guy is, especially when you're getting towards the end of the show, and
Yeah.
Jod, predictably becomes the villain of the series. It's that plays a role, but I think the show's a lot more interested in what you were mentioning that we get out of that final episode, which is this sort of um, confidence in these kids who leave scared and leave unsure of themselves, and
Mhm.
return home and are able to teach their parents something.
Yeah.
It's just really solid, fundamentally good storytelling, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I like, obviously, Jod is our villain, but I also kind of feel like he's more of an antagonist than a villain.
Sure.
We kinda learn more about, like, more of, I mean, throughout we see, at least early on, he definitely has sort of like a kindness towards these kids, and then
Yeah.
as the stakes get raised for him by the rest of his crew, his mutinous crew, we see, like, he kinda gets put in a position, and now that's he, because, like, we ne I never believe him when he's, like, threatening the
Yeah.
kids, because you can tell, like, towards the end when everyone believes that KB's, like, spiraling out and is gonna crash, like, you see, like, that kinda grip, like, he really does seem upset thinking that, something happened to her, like, he doesn't regret his actions so much as he's in a position where he's kind of forced to do this thing, otherwise he's gonna
Yeah.
get killed. But you still kind of feel like he's like, he even says like, I never want to hurt anybody. He's like, but I have to do this thing. Like, I gotta get this thing done. And
Yeah.
that's so refreshing from, like, what it comes down to is like, I'm in this position that's hard and I need to survive. He even talks about when we finally get like the background information about his force abilities. He's like, it's always been just about survival, just survival. He's like, I never want to
Yeah.
hurt anybody. This is what I've been, raised since I was a kid to think this way. This is what I do, and it's like it's cool to get someone who's like, first order, evil, Sith, Doctor. You know what I mean? It's just
Yeah.
like, it's like you said, it's very relatable. It's very relatable. Like, I've been in positions in real life where I'm like, I got to think about the bag. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So like, it's real. I mean, I'm never gonna kill anybody, but like, I get kind of being like good or bad to like an extent to get you to this certain point, right? And I love Jude Law. Like, I haven't seen Jude Law in anything in a long time. Like, man, I forgot the man knows how to act. I forgot just how good he is in like a lot of these like dramas and stuff. And so just
Yeah.
seeing him, and just like you mentioned, our core cast going down into the galaxy and getting to see all these different places and then coming back, and like I kind of like the reversal of like they start off on the treasure world. It's not
Yeah.
like in most stories you go looking for it. Like, to everybody else, it's lost. To them, it's kind of like, oh, like we this is what's normal to us with, like, the Gold Republic credits. And no, I like the expansion of the lore as well. Just like how there's an entire planet that's just designed as a mint. Like, that is
Yeah.
such a mind blowing idea, because I mean, it's and so I forget sometimes in Star Wars, like, the galaxy's so freaking vast and huge that of course it makes sense you would have a planet where, like, it's basically Fort Knox,
Yeah.
like with the defenses and the AI running everything, and everyone just kind of playing their role. Like, it's just really not, even for Star Wars, which is already full of novel ideas. It's even further more of a novel idea.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you touched on two things there that I really like. One is this sort of um, morally gray
Hmm.
lane that Jod inhabits, and it's interesting because in the finale episode, as Jod is watching out the window as the pirate ship crashes, I feel sad for him. I think that he's characterized, as you're saying, in this way that sort of garners sympathy, as you can tell that he's got a little bit more of bravado than he does bite, maybe, as a pirate here, and
Hmm.
he'll kill the mutinous Brutus, I think his name was.
such a cool design for a character.
Amazing design for a character. I loved him, and I love these moments you see where Jod is hardened, and you see that past, that struggle for survival, that merciless pirate life. But then you got these moments, and I think the kids pull them out of Jod, where he he has this softer side, or at least this more honorable side, this
Hmm.
desire to be better. And I think watching those ideas play out within him is really only possible because Jude Law is such an incredible actor. I really think in this show he gives one of the great performances of this current era of Star Wars, this current
Yeah.
canon of TV shows. It's up there with Skarsgård in Andor. I think it's really excellent. I think the nuance and the personality he can pull out of some of this dialogue, just
Hmm.
with the right intonation or the right pause or the right
Yeah.
spit syllable. He's just an outstanding performer, and this sort of highly theatrical material really plays to his strengths a lot, I think. The other thing you mentioned there that I really love is this notion of expanded world building here. And this is where I think we get into my earlier point that these familiar Star Wars ideas that we love are here, but they're presented a little bit differently. They have a little bit of a new spin on them. I love at Aten. I love this whole
Hmm.
notion of the many at type planets.
At something.
And
I saw this funny I saw a funny tweet. Someone was like, oh, what are they going to mention Atlanta?
yeah, I ideas like that, ideas like the very suburban at an environment we begin on, sort of contrasting that against these very, very grimy, Moss Eisley Cantina esque pirate
Hmm.
environments is just really great at illustrating the breadth of the galaxy. I really love that it's where that food bit you were describing earlier comes from. That first pirate refueling station they end up on, and there's just all manner of well, scum and villainy around.
Hmm.
And so I think it's trading on this intrigue of the underbelly of the universe that we've loved now for 50 about years of Star Wars, but it's presenting it in kind of a new way. And so I really appreciate that. I appreciate, as you're saying, the idea of the mint. I appreciate the idea of a pirate coded droid, the onyx cinder with its hole that can be stripped away. Like all these little details are what I
Ooh, a
look
little
for.
rat eye.
Yeah, yeah, all of this stuff, these little touches, the crabs, the hermit crabs that are built out of the
That
leg of
was
a
dope.
protocol droid or anything.
Yeah.
These are the touches that I think make Star Wars such an enduring franchise. And this show is just full of them in every single episode. I think it's really outstanding world building. I think it has given us more than a lot of the other Star Wars shows have, frankly.
Yeah. I mean, I like how yeah, yeah, a lot of those designs. I like there's a part where and it feels very Amblin like just when they're on the spa planet
Yeah.
and they the passage of time for SM33 which someone pointed out to me I didn't realize is SME basically SM33 is SME
I didn't
and
know this either.
and I was like, "Oh yeah, if you write it down visually, it's basically Smee." So, and like he's like, "Oh yeah, like it's on this planet, it's dangerous, and these mountain peaks, and like it's inhospitable." And they get there, and it's like from the passage of time, it's a resort, it's a destination resort planet, and he just seems so like he seems so disappointed in what's happened to the
Yeah.
planet, and they run into like this big like Cthulhu like being underground, like in a spa. And I think the alien name is something similar to like Cthulhu. I don't know what it is exactly, but like you think like, oh no, like they're in trouble now. And then it cuts back to later. It's like, oh, we just been entertaining him with stories. He's just been
Yeah.
listening. Just like you know what I mean? Like like there's like you think there's moments of like danger, and like you in the back of your head, you know that it's gonna happen to these kids. Like it just that would be just totally devastating if they did. But I just like the kind of what's the Ryan Johnson quote? Uh, about expectations. Abram, help me out here.
But subverting expectations?
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you. That did subvert. I thought like, oh, he's gonna be like whacking them around or breaking stuff, and he's like, no, he's just chilling. He's like, just promise you'll come back if you find that treasure. Come back and tell me more. I'm like, oh, okay, that's cute. I kind of like that. So just like
Yeah.
just the introductions of like these different creatures and different like this spa planet that I didn't even know existed, but now that's part of Star Wars lore. Is like there's this former pirate hideout turned spa planet with machine crabs and a
Yeah.
giant chomping trash compactor, and it's like all this extra stuff that's like not even great, grand stakes. It's cool just to have that extra stuff just thrown in there, and something that's not Tatooine, something that's not, you know, Coruscant, something that's like not the traditional Star Wars stuff. Like I like all that stuff being thrown in, and
Yeah.
just like these characters, like the that one off character, the bounty hunter, the albino chick with the white hair, like I'm like, I don't know who she is, but she looks really cool. She's continuing the trend of one off Star Wars characters that look really badass that you just never find out about. They're just kind of
Yeah.
like a Captain Phasma, kind of just thrown in, kind of like that. Like, I don't know who this character is, but I'm intrigued. We're not going to find out. Okay, that's fine. There's probably going to be material for that later on. And just like how everything kind of ends up, it's like the X-wing pilot, the kids not knowing about the X-wing pilots and like, oh, those look like the ships that like showed up, like, and I'm just kind of like, you're just thinking like those are X-wings, like, oh, of course you don't know, you don't really know, and just kind of like the lens of the galaxy through these kids are like when they meet the owl character. I love that design of a little character, just like a little
Yeah.
kind of like a
Kim.
Yoda-esque figure, not with the mannerisms, but just the the height and kind of alien looking and kind of like she has like this space observatory where she can see planets from. Like, there's just so many cool things in this game. Just so many cool things.
Yeah, I really think it's when we met Kim that I realized that I was watching one of my favorite Star Wars shows ever. Just this little owl character who lives in this observatory, just full of information. This, brilliantly smart character able to deduce coordinates to back to Ad-Atten, or so she thinks,
Hmm.
um, based on just these little context clues. I love that. I think sort of what you're speaking about, this idea of these very episodic adventures we go on, these one-off characters we meet. I think it really speaks to the incredibly prestigious set of directors behind this show. Just to rattle them off here, I just pulled up a list to make sure I didn't leave anybody out. Um, the list here is John Watts, who's directed many things. Obviously, the sort of modern Tom Holland Spider-Man movies are his big claim
Hmm.
to fame. We've got David Lowery, who directed The Green Knight, The Old Man and the Gun, A Ghost Story, a lot of
Oh,
very
okay.
interesting films. Bryce Dallas Howard, of course, is sort of
The
a
goat.
familiar face. Yes, absolutely. Um, Always is around to direct some of the best Star Wars stuff. And then the Daniels, who directed Everything Everywhere All at Once, directed an episode of the show. Which,
Really? I didn't know that.
yeah, they directed the one where they go to the faux AT-AT and end up
Oh, I
in the
completely forgot about
war,
that. That
which
was
is
a
really,
nice
yeah.
side story. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then we also have Lee Isaac Chung, who most recently directed Twisters, and
Mm.
then Jake Schreier, who is the one I'm the least familiar with, but did the show Beef that people really love, and
Okay, yeah, I've heard of it.
is also directing Thunderbolts. So it's really a star-studded cast, and they all bring, I think, unique sensibilities to their respective episodes, while still
Hmm.
having the show feel quite cohesive.
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes we talk about a lot of these Star Wars shows where it feels like, oh man, this pacing feels a little bit off. There's a lot to do in a couple episodes, et cetera, et
Hmm.
cetera. It doesn't really feel that way in Skeleton Crew. I think that, when you're working with people this talented and they're passing the baton, it's just sort of a relay race of amazing styles. And the story just progresses very nicely. It hits every beat it needs to hit. It introduces good characters, good scenarios, and it spends just enough time to make them, I think, trigger your imagination, satisfy you on a plot level, but leave you wanting more and leave you wondering. And I think that's something that Star Wars has been lacking a little bit. Even like Andor doesn't really leave space to wonder. I don't think
Right.
this really does. I think it makes you want to know what's around the corner, and
Hmm.
that's really at the heart of Star Wars. It always has been. Going back to A New Hope, we cited the cantina already, but that scene just engages the imagination so well, and I think that basically every episode of Skeleton Crew does too. When you find yourself in this conflict with these young kids fighting, over Eopes, and there's this war going on in this like mirror dimension planet, or you find yourself in this spa where it's this beautiful, upstanding, high-end, high-class place, but you can bribe your way through the door, and there's bounty hunters who are hanging around. Like, that's all really ripe for its own whole story. And I think
Mhm.
that that's a key part of what makes Star Wars Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why, like, with a lot of, because I think a lot of people, there's been going back to the more exterior fatigue of Star Wars in general. Like, I know there's a lot of people who feel they get annoyed, not annoyed, but they feel like not everything needs to be explained.
Yeah.
And I kind of like, if you don't like that, like, I think you'll like this show because there's a lot of things that are kind of like either quickly addressed or are not that important, and we kind of just leave that for the
Yeah.
side. Like, I got the way the show ends with, Jaw just getting away and just walking off. It's like, what happens to him? Like, I don't know. I guess we'll figure it out in the future. uh what happens now that Ad Adin doesn't have its defenses, they're all disabled now, and it's like, are people going to show up now and find it? Clearly, the Republic has like a head jump on it. The New Republic has a head jump with their X-wings. Like, is this going to fund the New Republic? Who knows? We don't get those answers. We kind of
Yeah.
just, it's kind of a one in. It's kind of like a. It's a. I was at first I was kind of bummed. I'm like, oh, okay, that's kind of it. But then the more I thought about it, I'm like, well, that's kind of cool that we don't have to have the greater connection to everything else. We don't need to, no, have that extra, post credit scene of, the New Republic delegates or Leia or someone showing up and like, oh, okay, here's our funding for, what I mean?
Yeah.
We don't know why At Adin is cut off from the greater galaxy. They don't ever explain that, and it's not that big of a deal, other than just like it's a lost treasure planet. That's literally all it is. It's just a loss. How did someone find it? Well, this pirate jacked up ship that was originally from here, and that's why he's able to get through like the defenses, and just like the realization. I like those little realizations of I mean, when they go to, like you said, like the mirror, the other at right, the other
Yeah.
planet, and like, oh, like, let's find the coordinates here, and like, oh, there's no coordinates here. Like, oh, here's that at, oh, but it's been scratched off. Like, oh, okay, well, that's like another obstacle. And the whole
Yeah.
like SM-33 having the programming to like cover his tracks, right? Of like, if someone inquires about it, then you flip on them. He like extends his limbs, gets all intimidating, and try to come after him. And then like Jod's like, again, like Jod's like, he could just let SM-33 attack the kids and like, just kill them, whatever. They have no defenses, but like he's like, he's not fully evil. He's like, I mean, it speaks to his need of greed and stuff, but like he saves the kids, and like you
Yeah.
kind of get this sense overall, like he's just about money. He's not really, he doesn't have like an ulterior motive. What I like about it, basically, what I realize is he he's exactly as he presents himself, really, if you pay attention. Because even when they meet, what's the Alice character again? You said Kim, right?
Kim.
Like,
Yeah.
before they even go away, he's like, hey, like, you're gonna hear some stuff from about her. You're gonna hear some stuff from her about me. Like, just disregard it. Like, she's like, like,
Yeah.
he comes off as kind of, he's like, he's like very charming, but also very slimy at the same time. And he like, the way those two parts of him are like, he has all these different names that people know him by, which I love. That's like a reoccurring bit, is like he keeps adding more name, like they know him as different names, and like the kids are kind of just always like what, like, wait, you told us your
Yeah.
name. Like, when they're when they go to the spa and he pretends to be like this doctor or whatever, and like, and then like the bounty hunter recognizes him, and like she has her own story about him, right? Just like how Kim has his story, her story about, like, everyone has like a different story about this character who's kind of, you think like he's like playing everybody, but he ends up just being exactly as he presents himself, as a pirate who kind of just does whatever he needs to be. And I love that pirate-esque mask helmet he
Yes.
wears.
Yeah.
That kind of has like the tricorn kind of like colonial like hat to it, but it's also like a mask. Like, that's such a cool design. Like, it's like, obviously when we first see him, like everyone just do like, oh, that's, that's the exile like captain or whatever, even without the mask. But like, that's, I just love the visual language of a lot of stuff they introduce into the show, into like the great, like, that's such a cool. And then like you're talking about Brutus earlier, he has like the 4 pistol, like
Yeah.
like, why does he need that many guns? Who cares? They're pirates. Like, they have all these, and like the moment, I know I'm kind of going all over the place and it's all like fragmented, but when they threaten Jod with like the airlock, similar to kind of like a walking the plank, like a very
Exactly.
pirate coded kind of like punishment. And then he does his, they're like, oh, okay, but we have to let him appeal, like it's part of the code. And it's like, it kind of reminds me of Pirates of the Caribbean, which is one of my favorite series. And like, I love the whole like, all right, here's our space timer with the sand that's not sand. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, all these very space coded equivalents of things that we're used to. Like, I love how, he goes on his spiel. He appeals to their sense of greed. He's like, like, don't you want your own fleets? And like, we get like the pirate kind of like hurrahs kind of stuff. Like it's just a really fun time. I just love this show, man.
I do too. I mean, I an example I think of the sort of confidence of the storytelling to just give you enough, not ever feeling the need to over explain, is
Hmm.
the whole backstory of SM-33 and Tack Renard. I love
Oh,
the
that's right.
idea
Yeah.
of this legendary, just totally infamous, and the name can silence a room type of figure who we only hear about in story and after his failure and his name drop. It's just super cool. Again, it prompts your imagination. Okay, I want to know
Hmm.
more about Tack Renard now, and it's the sort of thing where I'm sure there's gonna be an an EU book about him or something, and I think when you can tell a story that exists at the nexus of that and sort of gives a space to spin off into a book or into a comic,
Hmm.
whatever, but without feeling the need to inorganically, inauthentically create a character who's just there to be, that sort of tangent off into another story, you've got something really successful in your hands. They said, what do you need for a good pirate story? You need this legendary pirate who almost got the big score. You
Yeah.
need the aesthetics, you need the codes, you need the mannerisms, and all that stuff slots nicely into Star Wars because we've always had pirates, but we've never had like pirates. And
Right.
so
Right.
what happens when you have those? You get this just web of ideas and cultures that are so clearly communicated without ever feeling heavy-handed. And I think that's really the strength of the script. I think it's certainly one of the strongest scripts we've had in Star Wars in quite a while. Particularly because this show also does something with Whim, sort of our main character, that
Hmm.
to me rectifies a long-standing issue I've had as a massive fan of The Last Jedi, which is get having a story in the Star Wars universe that is about empowering anybody to be great.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
This notion, without litigating again The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker for the umpteenth time, um, because it's been talked about basically every week in the culture for 7 years
A
now,
reoccurring theme in the Discord.
and in our Discord, yes. But this notion of, oh, Ray is a nobody, actually Ray is a Skywalker. Here, Wim truly is a nobody, and that moment of him with reverence looking up at the blockade runner and the X-wings and watching the fleet, and he's just sort of staring and knowing there's a galaxy out there and a future and something bigger that he can be a part of, and I think that's a really beautiful message. I think that that's the sort of message that made Luke Skywalker interesting, but even more so because
Hmm.
Wim's ambitions were even lower. His sort of status in life had no, there's no great significance to his lineage. He's just a kid that wants this big adventure and to fit in and find his place. And he learns that he can and that he can be more and be great.
He's not even like from like a poor background or
Yeah.
anything. He's
He's
not like a
just,
farm boy. He's just a regular suburban kid,
yeah.
which I love.
Yeah, I think it really is a wonderful thematic statement, and that's why the show really felt quite complete to me, even though it does cut to credits extremely fast in that last episode. But I actually like that.
Hmm.
Finish off the plot, leave these dangling threads with Jod and everyone, complete Wim's arc, and get out. I think that it was really effective storytelling.
I would love to see these characters return in some form.
Yeah,
The whole thing with there's just so I feel like there's just so many stories to go with more of it. I the where our characters end up. I love the real on a tangent. I love the reoccurring bit of Neil always taking a bubble bath. I don't know why. I just find that kind of endearing. But
yeah,
first thing he does when he gets home is take a bubble bath. And but like I want to know more about like how these characters fit in because like if this is set like between between episode 6 and 7 of the films, like where do these characters end up and stuff? And I
yeah,
think there's so much room for like really cool storytelling. I I want to see. I love the whole notion of Jaw. The whole like he's like I'm not a Jedi. He's like I just learned some tricks from like a Jedi who was a Jedi, and then she gets Order 66 really early on. I love the filling in of the blanks too of when he talks to the AI the giant central
Yeah.
AI. And he's like, I'm the emissary, and I'm also, or is emissary or ambassador? I forget which term they use, but the emissary and a Jedi. And then the AI kind of catches him on that. He's like, "Well, you're lying about one or the other because according to my last record, like all the Jedi." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's okay." There's a connection to the films
Yeah.
of like the last transmission they probably got was when the Emperor sends Order 66 and everything, and like every Jedi is down in the Republic, all that nonsense, all that. So it's like, oh shoot, like like you thought like these backwater world people don't know what's going on, but like you missed that little detail. And so I kind of liked all of that. I love the like you mentioned this earlier, Bill, that the sort of adventure that each of the kids has a role, right? KB
Yeah.
has to get the ship up in the sky, and Neo goes to get the turret. He's like, well, if this planet is just like the other one, then there's got to be like the turret on the. And he goes and like he has like his adventure self discovery of the whole how he can be braver than what he where we start with him in the story of like not like don't touch anything on the ship and like all that and not wanting to get in trouble, and then like where we are at the end of like I'm gonna save everybody, I'm gonna take out the ships with these cannons, and like that whole that's the middle part you mentioned too, like when he's on the world and like he meets this warrior like tribe, and like he's kind and they kind of make fun of him for like his kind of like soft upbringing, and then he kind of returns to them return kind of does that cultural exchange of like
Yeah.
hey, like we come from a world where we don't have to worry about these kind of things, and like yeah I'm like he's like I'm soft because like I don't have to worry about these kind of things, but he's like but like it's still like they learn like the overall goodness or the overall kind of trusting nature of him, and like there is like that little worlds collide kind of thing for them, and where we end up with KB. I love the little look. We have like two scares for KB, right? When she runs
Yeah.
out of power, and she kind of just she's like practically telling Wim what to do. She puts a little hole as like the little like the mold for like I love that whole like thing. It's like completely it's not really super necessary to show all that, but I kind of like how like she's like breaking down and she explains like hey I'm probably going to pass out right now, here's the instructions on what to do, and like that kind of little scare that Wim has, he has to have this massive responsibility of the this girl's about to die on him, and then of course something happens, but like just where and then the whole thing with Ferd as she learns to become much more humble. She's very adamant in the beginning when she's kind of like, oh, like these boys, these dumb boys, like they don't, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
she quickly learns to like there's like so much more out there. She learns to kind of she becomes a little more humble, a little more straight, but she's still like a very like solid leader. Just the different things that happen. I feel like Wim and then Abram, the moment when Wim takes out the lightsaber and then he's holding it the wrong way, and immediately like kind of jolts back, like yeah, you're not ready for this quite yet. But he has that hero moment at the end where he finally tells his dad, okay, we're gonna do this, we're gonna distract him, like you said about him being a nobody, like just because he doesn't have the force, just because he doesn't have the midichlorian count or whatever, or the holy the nature of the force with him, like he's still a very capable kind of don't underestimate kind of kid, and so, like he coordinates, he instructs like okay, you're gonna go do this, you're gonna go do that, and they're able to save, like you said, they save the adults, they save the planet, and it's like it's just very good natured, very good storytelling, and I just like it just feels so different from like when we're talking about like the acolyte, where we have these characters who are they're Jedi, and like we don't get to know them that well, and they're kind of just discarded very quickly. It's like here we like this is what it's like when you have characters that you can relate to, but you also give them time to breathe, give them
Yeah.
time to fail, give them time to learn, give them time to succeed. Like it's just it's just phenomenal.
Yeah, and it's funny. I That's another element of the show that I really like. It's funny. There's some really good physical humor here. There's some witty dialogue. I think it taps into that element of Star Wars that really does define like A New Hope. A New Hope is a very funny movie, and I think people forget that a lot. And I think we've sort of lost a lot of the humor out of Star Wars, which I don't think is necessarily a problem, but I think it's an element that's underappreciated in the core films. Um, and so I like that that's back here too. It feels like I feel like it really understands what makes Star Wars special on a deeper level. And I think that's
Mhm.
important because it's great to have the more sort of surface level homages and these more complicated plot lines and this really lore heavy or centric storytelling. We have very positive reviews of a lot of the Star Wars shows, almost all of them on this channel. because there's something to love in every style of Star Wars storytelling. But to me, I think Skeleton Crew really gets back to something really pure and really basic about why we love this franchise. And it's just a shame that this is the one that doesn't find the audience. I truly think that if anybody who'd ever watched Star Wars was mandated to watch Skeleton Crew, they'd lose access to the Disney Plus. That they'd very quickly be like, "Wow, I'm glad that I got threatened here because I love what this story is presenting." I I wanted to also just generally shout out the production design. I mean, we've talked about it in a broad sense, and we've talked about some specific aliens and things, but I really just want to double underline how wonderful it is to have these big practical effects. I was seeing Bryce Dallas Howard posting about how that massive crab, the little hermit crabs try to lead Wim back to Wim and KB. That was a big puppet. Like there really was an immense
Really?
amount of craftsmanship that went into this show, and I think that's also why some of the CGI feels a little bit hokey because there is so much more practical effects work here
Hmm.
that it's just so commendable. I would love I'd love to have a little documentary about how Skeleton Crew came together.
Yeah, that would be nice. I mean, I honestly had no idea that it was practical. I don't know, maybe it's my TV screen or something, but like I'm just like watching. I'm like I can tell the ships are practical, and I know a lot of the settings are practical, but I didn't know that there was a. I think first there was I think that there was some wonky CGI like you mentioned. I think the
Yeah,
one hut that we see at the spa planet like just looked kind of. Look like remind me of Jabba from episode 1 when he's at the pod races, like kind of you know what I mean, like that very clearly like CGI looking
yeah,
like we're not doing Jabba like Return of the Jedi anymore. It's just it's too expensive, but not for like a one cut away character or whatever. But like I remember you did mention that you were concerned or you were confused at certain things that with you said with like generative AI or something. You said that some of the lighting on some of the scenes you said look kind of weird or something.
yeah. I mean, so I think that the biggest like because I will also note that I think the show is shot significantly better than particularly the more Dave Filoni heavy stuff, which is blocked more like the cartoon shows. This
Mhm.
is just some really fundamentally good cinematography. Like I love the shot of when they're on Kim's planet, all of them walking in a line over the dune and they're nicely silhouetted. Like there's just some really again, it speaks to the people who are behind the camera for this show, but it looks a lot better than I think a lot of the shows do. But yeah, the biggest technical issue for me is the lighting. I think the show is just way too goddamn dark. And in those early episodes, the combination of the two of the real darkness, the like heavy use of red lighting in the early part of the show, and the sort of somewhat un-Star Wars at first, feeling security droids and buildings.
Mhm.
I was peering at it, I'm like, is this are they using AI here to finish some of this stuff? And some of the creatures really do not look right. Like there's this fuzzy, like pixie type of little creature in a cage in episode 2 in particular. I'm like, I don't think that that is regular CGI. But this is all
Hmm.
speculative because we don't know. Disney has spoken about how they're working on an AI assisted post production process for sort of the Disney empire in a larger sense. I don't think that's the case in Skeleton Crew. I simply think it's sort of an unfortunate mix in certain scenes of poor lighting, sort of low budget CGI work, rush CGI work, kind of making it look a little off. But I think
Mhm.
that on the whole, kind of taking the show as one big unit, it does look quite good. I think because of that, because of the practicality of a lot of it, the scenes that don't look that good feel really like uncanny. But it's
Okay.
sort of, in my view, now that I've seen the whole show, it's sort of a small issue in the grand scheme.
Yeah, because I'm like, I was concerned when you brought that up to me. I was like, kind of crestfallen. I'm like, oh no, did they? I know I watched like the previous. I forgot which episode it was, but episode previous to when you said that, and I was looking for like anything. I was like, I mean, I'm not that great at detecting AI. I mean, the obvious stuff is always just like if there's a lack of symmetry, like if
Yeah.
one side of something is bigger than the other, or like when the faces are
Yeah.
ugly, distort. when you you know what I mean, like that kind of stuff. Like if I don't see that, it's gonna fly right over me, really. So most of the time, so like I couldn't really tell, but I remember when you did say that, I was like, oh man, I was like, maybe I just have a bad eye for AI. That could just be it too, because like you'll see online people put like those pictures, they do like that weird heat map thing, and they show
Yeah.
you where like certain things like they just change or whatever, and I'm like, oh man, maybe we're gonna get like a what you call it? What's that? What's that show on YouTube they do for video games? Digital Foundry or something.
Oh,
They're gonna do that
oh,
for
oh, oh,
like
yeah.
someone's gonna do that to Star Wars to look for every like inconsistency or something like that. But yeah, I mean, I couldn't really tell. I know when you said something about the how everything's dark, it just kind of takes me back to Solo again, where like
Yeah.
it's just I think when it comes to Star Wars, like either things are either too bright or too dark, and it's really hard to find unless you're using natural lighting outdoors. It's really hard to find like that proper mix of effects.
Yeah, I mean, it's just expensive, and it requires. I mean, it's somewhat of a crutch, you know. If it's darker, you have a little bit more room to play with than if you have these really stark environments that you have to very carefully detail in CG. And again, to be clear, I don't think that like whole scenes of the show are AI generated. And I have no real proof that it is, but I just look at some of the ways the creatures move. Sometimes I'm like, I wouldn't be surprised if this is finished with some kind of generative process. Again, it's just gonna become more and more common, and this might just be my paranoia about the sort
Hmm.
of onset of AI post production. But again, it's hard to levy that as a massive complaint when we know factually that a lot of meticulous, careful, real world craftsmanship went into making puppets and making everything for the show. So I think it does represent a high watermark for how these Star Wars shows can look. It just also has some weaker visual elements, and that's kind of par for the course, even for as much money as they spend on these shows. I do want to particularly shout out Neil. I just have to say, I just love him so much. You love
Hmm.
him even more than I do. He's your Discord PFP. I think what really gets me about him is not just his face, not just his voice. It's really his overalls. I love his overalls. I love where he waddles around in his little overalls. He's just so cute, and I think that that's so useful for his. We've talked about it already, but so useful for his arc of finding that bravery, but never losing his heart,
Hmm.
never losing his kindness. He's just this little guy who's trying his best, and I think he feels like the sort of most genuine, cute character that we've gotten in a while. Because there always has to be one.
I've already seen so much merch of him already, from the little
Yeah,
pop vinyl figures to like I think I saw like a backpack online somewhere with just it's just his head and like stuff like that. So they always there's always one. It's like the Star Wars, instead of the rule of two, it's like the rule of one for Star Wars. Like there must always be one cute character.
I don't really buy that much Star Wars stuff, but when inevitably there's the Star Wars Black Series figure for Neil, I'll buy him and I'll keep him on my desk. I have very few of those Black Series figures, just every once in a while. Okay, one I really like, and he belongs on my desk if I can have him. But
Would he come packed with a weapon or something? Or
I don't know. I think he would just he maybe comes with his bubble bath. little, a little display, a little diorama. Um, Andrew, are there any other elements of the show you feel like you want to shout out and sort of help convince people to watch Skeleton Crew on the back of?
um, I think it's very small. It's not even that big of a deal, but seeing that really cool moment when they open the vaults
Yeah,
and Jod sees like it's like the printing, like yeah, it's a mint, but it's like what you imagine kind of like what infinite wealth would kind of look like. It was just like all these pallets and pallets of gold, and he touches it and it kind of starts falling down like a little like waterfall effect, and he's just like freaking out, and he asks the droid how many more vaults there are, and he's like, "There's like 1,500 more of these," and just like that. That's having played. Um, this is, I promise it's related. Having played, what was the Star Wars game that just came out? I'm so bad. My memory's bad.
that just
Um,
came out.
uh, It's not scoundrels. It's not called scoundrels.
Squadrons? Oh, no, 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 Outlaws.
Outlaws. It was in that family.
Yeah,
Outlaws,
yeah, yeah,
and like kind of how that game ends. Like this is the payoff for what I
yeah,
wanted in that game in terms of like here's the financial payoff and seeing that and I was like, oh, like that's so cool. And like just cause like, and then the part where KB slides down the ramp on top of the credits, and it's like that's cool. Like you actually see physical like gold like that. Cause like, I mean, again, it's not a big important detail, but when I think of credits when they show Star Wars, there's always like these flimsy like little card kind of things, and like, oh no, these are old Republic credits, and just like the whole like that callback like that kind of invokes that sense of like oh like from like another age kind of thing like
yeah,
it's just cool to kind of see that and the just the notion the idea of this whole planet that's been cut off from the rest of the galaxy and it's like just been self operating autonomous on its own they're just storing these gold credits for who knows what like they even mentioned like oh
yeah,
it's been a long time since we have an emissary. I'm just thinking like probably like hundreds maybe thousands of years or something so I mean, that's not a selling point for the for the show for anybody. It's just something personally I thought that was really cool.
yeah,
But I mean, for people who are, I mean, if you managed to make it this far, you probably don't care about spoilers, right? If you've seen the whole thing, you still haven't seen the show. But I, I know Star Wars for a long time has been kind of crying wolf to an extent of like, you should watch this. One's like, yeah, yeah, sure, sure. Like people were like, okay, we saw Ahsoka. Like, okay, that was kind of cool. We saw Hayden. Like, okay, that was cool. And it's like watch Acolyte, and I mean we weren't even that big on Acolyte in the
yeah,
end, but like I feel like a lot of the audience, a lot of people who what I call fair weather Star Wars fans have kind of just been burned, or they feel
yeah,
like they've been burned for a while, and it's well, we only care about the movies now at this point, or maybe like just wake me up when like a big movie comes out, or like so people feel like that way. I feel like you generally should give this a try. If you don't want to, if you're tired of Star Wars in the sense of like how much material do I need to know beforehand, like none, other than the original trilogy, and just know that there's movies after six. That's all the background knowledge you really need because
yeah,
and nothing else. There's no required reading other than just the original movies and just knowing, even, without even watching them, just knowing that the Force Awakens is comes after that. That's all you really need to know. So my pitch is go in with an open mind. There's great characters. I promise you, if Abram and I both agree, then it's really great.
absolutely. I think sort of where I would close is I really actually like your point about the mint a lot because it works for the sort of pirate theming of these, they're doubloons. There's got to be some
There you
sort
go.
of
Yeah.
classic, historical currency that you gotta chase after, and to me that represents a really smart usage of the timeline because ultimately, if Jod was around for Order 66, and as this age now he's a Padawan, then this is not probably that it's not that far into the status quo of the New Republic,
Mhm,
but it demonstrates that you can use this timeline and you can walk far away from it, and you
mhm,
can find really interesting pockets of storytelling, and pockets that don't need to be contingent on anything else. And while I that might sound like it's Crew is clearing a low bar of just getting away from the core saga, I don't think that that's the case because I think this show is just so well executed from a technical
mhm,
perspective, from a performance perspective, from a writing perspective, just from a world building perspective. They get everything so right that to me it really is becoming the gold standard for how you can flexibly explore the galaxy still. Obviously, Andor to me is always going to be in a league of its own, but Andor is not an archetype that you can follow. Andor is such a one of a kind, politically charged, uniquely situated story in the Star Wars universe, both in fiction and out of it too. But I look at Skeleton Crew and I say, hey, look, if you can get this level of talent to do another show, not a Skeleton Crew season two necessarily, although I'd love that, but
I would
something
too.
else with a similarly unique premise, a similarly unique aesthetic, you can do this forever. And I just simply hope that Disney isn't discouraged and realizes that Skeleton Crew's failings in terms of ratings are really not its own.
Right.
It's the
It's
failings.
external.
Yeah, it's external. It's a marketing issue. It's a franchise issue generally. And I think the way you climb out of that is to do more stuff like this. And so I'm just really happy that even if we don't get a second season, which does feel unlikely, we have this and it stands alone. It's not like the Acolyte where you end and you feel like you're just beginning. Here, I think we completed the journey in a
Mhm.
satisfying way. So I can't recommend it enough. But as you're saying, if somebody got this far, either they don't care about spoilers or they're here to just sort of commiserate in a general love of a underappreciated show. So if you fall into that camp, thank you for being part of the few who watched a Star Wars show. But everyone should do it because it's so good. It's so good. Um, but yeah, anything else about Skeleton Crew you want to shout out?
Mm, nothing really. I mean, I just want to see
Yeah,
a lot of those characters again. Uh,
yeah,
I want to know. I just want to know more. Just like how did Jod, burn Kim or these other characters, and like I don't know. He feels very Jack Sparrow coded without being, as weird and as
yeah.
Jack Sparrow. You know what I mean?
Yes,
As I don't know, like sunburned, damaged, and drunk, and all that. Like
yeah.
just Jude Law, man. We need to see you more stuff again, man. You need to come back. I know you're probably resting on residuals and stuff, but like, do some more stuff again, man.
Jude Law in Star Wars is a testament to the fact that Lucasfilm needs to just sign bigger checks. Do whatever you have to do to get actually really talented performers in Star Wars. Now, I love, of course, that you go back to the OT, and a lot of those people are new or upcoming actors, and that's cool. And I love that. And I love that we're introducing people and we're having lesser known actors, like Acolyte
Mhm.
has a lot like that. But sometimes you just got to have a real seasoned, strong performer at the heart of your series, and it was Jude Law here. So
Yep.
get more people like Jude Law. Do it.
There you go.
But Andrew, I think we've had a very good discussion about Skeleton Crew. A wonderful, wonderful, wonderful show. My final question for you, of course, is if you had to, if Jod had his flintlock blaster to your head, where would you rank this in your list of Star Wars shows?
Oh, I put this right behind Andor and and well, actually, not right behind Andor, but third place for me behind Mando and Andor.
Sure.
I think, particularly the first two seasons of Mando.
Yeah, yeah. I go Andor, and then I go Skeleton Crew, and then I think I go Ahsoka, and then Mando.
Yeah, Ahsoka's definitely top five.
Yeah, Ahsoka's funny because it's like the complete inverse of Skeleton Crew in like every imaginable way, including like just being coherently filmed, which Ahsoka isn't. But Ahsoka has that modern Star Wars feel that pays off my love of the series in one way, and then
Sure.
this pays it off in another. Um, this pays off in a way that I think more people can appreciate. But hey, we're getting Andor. We're getting Ahsoka season 2. We're getting Andor season 2. There's a lot of really good stuff on the horizon.
Yes.
But while you're waiting for Andor, you have that Disney Plus. You forgot to cancel it. I know you did. You and the audience. You still have Disney Plus. I promise. Just type in your password. It's gonna be there. You watch Skeleton Crew. But Andrew, we couldn't end on anything other than one phrase in particular, and let me know what it is.
May the force be with you.